I'm recording this episode a couple weeks early, but by the time you hear this, my smoked rot beer will be in the fermenter and probably ready to bottle. I got my ingredients for that beer from our friends and sponsors Desiree and Dave of HighGravityBrew.com. The Build Your Own Beer page is a handy and fun way to bundle up your ingredients so you can order multiple batches at once and even name them on the order. And of course, HighGravityBrew.com has everything you need in Warthog electric systems and controllers to help you take the pain out of propane. Show them some love for being such loyal supporters of this show at family-owned and operated HighGravityBrew.com. That's HighGravityBrew.com. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, October 12th, 2023. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, we'll chat with our good friend Casey Letellier on the occasion of the 5th anniversary of his brewery, Ivory Bill Brewing in Siloam Springs, Arkansas. And we'll take a trip back in time to almost 18 years ago when Casey and I first met at a collaborative brew session in 2005. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing, and many thanks to everybody who is helping out in that way. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter. Financial supporters have already seen the video episode I'm going to post to the general public this week, the week that you're hearing this. In fact, they saw it 2 weeks ago. Thanks to my being on vacation, that is. It's the episode with more jokes about the Battle of Hastings than you'd think you would ever see on a homebrew video. I challenge you, in fact, to find more Battle of Hastings jokes in a beer show than on that show. I think it's a world record. And I swear that I didn't tip Steve off that the 1066 reference was coming. I'm recording this show a couple of weeks ahead of time, so if there's something newsworthy that I should be commenting on that I'm not, I'll catch up next week. Let's take a quick look into the mailbag. Our friend John Kruger from Australia wrote in, just saw the hot dog beer episode, a classic example of overthinking a recipe. That's an understatement, I think. John says, I love the tincture idea, though. I'm trying to formulate a homemade citrus aperitif and have some blood, orange peel, and flesh sitting in a jar of Polish spirit. That's 95% ABV. It smells like essence of hangover. But I'll cut it back with some simple syrup later. John says, regarding the hot dog beer, a friend of mine made a roast chicken beer. It tasted surprisingly of beer with a roast chicken added. And a local brewery made a Thai green chicken curry beer. That was apparently too close to the bullseye as well, John says. Essence of hangover. It must, in my college days, that smelled like Polo Cologne. I think nowadays it's maybe Axe body spray and Red Bull. I don't know. Thanks, John. Hey, you know what's going to smell great? The smoked rot beer that I will have brewed by the time you hear this, with the seasonal lager yeast L26 Pilgrimage from Imperial Yeast. I can peer into my crystal ball or maybe crystal clarboy and see that Pilgrimage will have done a great job with this beer. It's a 2-gallon batch, so I'm not planning, I didn't use a starter. Those 200 billion cells in each easy-to-open package of Imperial Yeast always do a great job. My stir plate is dusty, in fact, because I don't use it anymore for moderate gravity 5-gallon batches, and my airlocks are usually bubbling before bedtime. L26 Pilgrimage produces lagers with a very clean profile that accentuate the flavors and aromas of Pilsner malt along with the aromatics of noble hops. And I'm sure it will do a great job with my smoked beer. I mean, by the time you hear this, it already did a great job with my smoked beer. Ask your local homebrew store about L26 Pilgrimage from Imperial Yeast, and check out all the dependable deliciousness at imperialyeast.com. It's imperialyeast.com. Okay, hard to believe it's been 5 years since Casey and Dorothy founded Ivory Bill, and even harder to believe that Casey and I have been friends for almost 18 years. The other day, Susan and I headed up to Siloam Springs to pick up some delicious commemorative beers at Ivory Bill and to check in with Casey. Casey Letellier, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thank you very much. It's always really nice to talk to you, James.
We're here on your 5th anniversary. You got a house full and people drinking lovely beer and eating barbecue from down the street, which is what Susan and I just did. What have you got on tap special?
We have a beer that we brewed just a couple months after we opened. So it's the 2018 Bourbon Barrel Apple Strong. Local apples, Simpson's Golden Promise, and oats.
Yeah, Susan had that, and I had a little sip or two, and it was delicious. How's it changed over the years?
It's gotten really silky and elegant, and it has just kind of a slow down and pay attention kind of quality to it, which is then kind of a fun contrast to the other special beer we released, the Raspberry Desire Path, which is a barrel-aged imperial mild with a whole bunch of raspberries from Stay and Step in Tawny Town. And that beer is much more stand up and slap your face kind of, some nice acidity, a much more bold flavor profile. So they're kind of a fun contrast to each other.
Yeah, I had that, and it was a perfect contrast to my pulled pork. So it is a nice palate cleanser, but also good on its own.
I can see that working very nicely as a pairing. Yeah.
So 5 years, it's been some ups and downs in these past 5 years, and you're still here. It looks like you're still going strong. As you're reflecting on the past 5 years, how has it been?
It's a strange time to start a brewery. This past 5 years, the kind of feeling like we were just kind of hitting our stride a couple years in, and then COVID comes and shuts everything down, and we spent time is a flat circle now, and I don't remember how long it was. We spent a considerable amount of time only serving cans, just like pass through the door, just crowlers to go. But it felt like the people who wanted us to be here really stepped up and bought a whole bunch of beer and kept us alive. And yeah, so now 5 years later, we're still here.
And the third crowler of beer that I'm buying today is a beer that kind of brings back memories of that time for you.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So this one's called Extra Extra Encore. Our always a different every batch Extra Extra IPA. We kind of experiment with different malt profile, different hop varieties. So we've made 32 different batches. And for our anniversary, we let people vote for a batch they wanted to bring back. And the batch that they brought back, batch 10, was right in the middle of COVID lockdowns. So today was the first time we actually poured that beer for anyone, because when we actually released that beer, it was just only cans out the door, no one in the tap room.
So a little bittersweet, maybe?
Yeah, it weirdly, stirred some emotions for me, which I was not expecting. But yeah, it's I'm grateful to be in the company of my fellow humans. It was a hard season.
Well, we're so glad you made it. The reason one reason I'm doing this interview, obviously, is to congratulate you on your 5th anniversary, you and Dorothy, here with Ivory Bill. But then also, here in this town, Siloam Springs, Arkansas, this December, 18 years ago, you invited me to your house, and we had a brewing session with your friend Brian and your friend Jason, and you guys invited me in. We did a collaborative brew, and it was the beginning of a long-time friendship, and I'm really, really grateful for that. So I wanted to share that with everybody and kind of do something I've never done before and dig up an episode out of the archives, because I don't know how many people go back to 2005. But I think this episode deserves to be heard. And I hope that you'll listen to it, too.
I will. I absolutely will. That will be fun. I'm sure we all sound a lot younger.
Well, I sound a lot stiffer. I don't know. I sound a lot more like I'm trying to be Mr. Professional journalism guy back then. And you sound the same, and I haven't heard the other guys in a while. Brian Warren we hung out with on several occasions. It was so fun for me to go back and listen to that. What do you recall from that? I mean, I don't know that you've listened to that show since then, but what do you recall from 18 years ago?
I recall that at that point I was still, my brew day sprawled out, not only taking over the kitchen but also the living room. I believe the mash tun was on the kitchen table.
No, it was on the carpet. It was in a chair, like on the carpet in the living room, I think, as I recall. And I remember thinking about that and saying, "Oh my God, he must be renting."
And I was.
But I don't think we spilled anything. I was amazed. Yeah. Susan's laughing, but she very youthful. You guys were just out of college, and I was 40 back then. So they'll tell you our age difference. But it was such a fun day, and I remember the beer being pretty good.
I do too. Yeah, that was the first of several of that what we called the Blind Mice Brewing sessions that we did. And I was pleased with how that beer ended up turning out.
Well, you've got a customer, so I'm going to let you go. But again, thank you for starting that friendship so long ago, and thanks for keeping in touch. And congratulations to you and Dorothy on your 5th anniversary.
Thank you so much. Thanks, James.
Okay, well, here we are in Siloam Springs, Arkansas, at the house of
Casey Letellier.
Otherwise known as Casey from Siloam Springs. As often mentioned in the early podcasts, we finally get to meet in person. Is it everything that you thought it would be?
Oh, yes.
And another listener that I actually have met in person,
Brian Warren.
Otherwise known as Brian from Inglewood, right?
That's correct.
And we have a new addition, and I don't know, are you a listener, Jason?
I haven't yet.
Oh, a future listener to the podcast. And introduce yourself.
Jason from Pea Ridge.
Jason from Pea Ridge. So what are we doing here, Casey? What is the theory of today?
Well, this is what we call a blind mice brew that we're doing, and all 4 of us today have gotten together, and we have sort of a fourth of the ingredients for a batch of beer, and at this point, nobody really knows what anybody else has brought.
And I forgot what I brought, so it'll be a surprise to me
helps,
too.
Yeah, lots of surprises.
So shall we do the unveiling?
Sure.
So I mean, how does this work? Once we get all the ingredients, do we have latitude of saying, oh, maybe we don't want to use all of that, or?
I think we can play a little bit, especially as it comes to like hops. I think if we all happen to bring high alpha hops, we'll probably kind of move them later in the boil, so we don't end up with hop juice.
And we don't necessarily have to use all the hops that we brought.
Oh, I think we ought to.
Oh, well, there you go.
How much hops did you bring, James?
Well, I only brought 2 ounces.
Oh, okay, that's not so bad. This is actually the 3rd blind mice brew that we've done. We started this about a year ago, and that was just a 3 blind mice, which is kind of how we got that name. And that ended up being kind of, I guess we kind of coined that what did we call that?
We called it various things. We called it a Grand Cru because
yeah.
we looked like through all kinds of. That one actually had like spices and molasses, and it was
a much more of a kitchen sink type of brew. But This one's a little bit more. We kind of said we were probably shooting for a barley wine this time, and so we can kind of like adjust our hop strengths and that sort of thing to shoot for that. But we'll find out when we see who brought what grains and that sort of thing.
Well, let's see what we got. Who do you want to start with?
Jason?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Jason, show and tell.
Well,
where's your stuff?
Casey, what is this?
It's
2-row.
It's 2-row? Yeah.
2-row? That's good.
I wasn't sure how many I was going to. 5 pounds.
Okay.
Of that. And for a specialty grain, I have a pound of biscuits.
Ah,
That was within the rules, wasn't it?
yeah. Biscuit's definitely in there. Yeah.
And
well, that's good.
my hop contribution is Tettnanger.
Ah,
Pellets is what I have, so pellet hops.
there you go. So that's the first. So, and what alpha acid do we have?
4.2,
4.2.
pretty low.
So now, shall we look in my bag?
Sure, let's find out what you brought.
Since we found out that biscuit is okay, that's basically what I bought. It says Victory on there, but it's basically the same thing, right?
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Okay. Well, there you go. And then I decided to get a little more exotic than I've done in the past on the base malt. It's not, real exotic, I don't think. Belgian Pale Ale.
Oh, that works well for what I brought.
Oh, okay.
We're almost done here.
And then I brought hop plugs to play with. And I just brought Cascade at 7.3% alpha acid. So I thought we could play with the plugs. So Casey?
Well, I brought some two-row as well as my base. I've got 4 pounds of two-row. And then Jason actually picked up some Munich for me, so I'm going to add that too as some of my base malt.
Okay.
And for my other grains, I have some melanoidin and some...
I think there's an ointment or a salve to help out with that.
Oh, well.
I had the melanoidin pretty bad last year, but
The doctor helped you out.
Yeah.
That's good to know. And I have some dark German crystal.
Oh, okay. So,
And for hops, I have Warrior
ooh,
at 14.5% alpha acid.
wow.
And I've got an ounce of those.
Okay. And that's whole hops.
Whole hops. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've had people get angry at me for saying whole leaf hops. Because it's
Right.
technically
They're
not
flowers.
leaves.
Right.
It's the cones or the flowers.
Yeah, fine. we won't bug you on that one.
And then, Brian.
I brought 4 or 5, I can't remember, I'll have to weigh it, pounds of Belgian Pilsner. And I brought, for my specialty, I brought some German wheat.
Mm.
And then for my hops, I brought Ultra, which I've never brewed with before, but I'm looking forward to trying it. And those are about 2% alpha acid, so they're actually pretty mild.
Very good.
All right, let's make a recipe.
That sounds good. And we'll come back. Once we had a chance to formulate a rough recipe, we headed to the carport to mill the grain. Get a big snootful of that grain dust there, Brian. That's good for you. You'll get brewer's lung here in no time at all.
I'll give you some little extra room in there.
There we go. We've got an assembly line working here. Jason's now stepped up to pour into the hopper. And of course, the only one not working is me. Of course, this is kind of work. I'm recording the event.
Holding that recorder is a lot of work, James. I appreciate you doing that for us.
Well, it's heavy. Maybe I can fetch beer later. That'll be my job. Okay, we're back inside. Is that Coltrane that we're...
Miles Davis.
Miles Davis. Sorry, just offended some jazz people out there, I'm sure.
So you sounded smarter later.
Well, I could just record it over again and say,
Is that
Miles Davis?
Yes, it is.
In fact, why don't we start all over again? Is that Miles Davis?
No, that's John Coltrane.
Oh! Now, Casey's busy assembling the mash tun, and that is an Igloo 48-quart square cooler. I don't think I've ever seen one like that, with a copper manifold in the bottom.
Yes, manifold. That's a nicer way to say it. I coiled some copper up and hacksawed some slots into it.
It's a manifold.
Well, thank you.
Technically. Would you guys not agree?
Oh, that's one mighty fine manifold.
It looks kind of like a scorpion's tail in the bottom there. And then once we get it assembled, we'll be ready to mash.
Can you hear stirring sounds?
Yeah, can you stir more loudly? We can't hear that. Now we're here in your living room, and you got the mash tun going. We're almost
24 out of 25.
25. So we got one more quart of water to go in the mash tun.
And
Is that the last of the grain?
yeah, 25 pounds of grain. So hopefully we make some big beer here.
Yeah.
If not, we're doing something really wrong.
And Brian's over there calculating our IBUs.
I'm not a bean counter by nature, so I could totally mess this up.
We've got a graphic designer working on calculating the IBUs.
Maybe we need to make the engineer do that.
Is there an engineer among the group?
Yeah.
The engineer's making the labels, and then you got the. So that's looking pretty porridgey there.
Yeah.
Wonder what
smells so nice.
Wonder what the temperature is.
We should find out.
Let's see if our calculations on the temperature are anywhere close. Man, that's a big mash. Drum roll, please.
If we hit it on the first try, I'm not going to be able to brew without you guys anymore. I always go low.
The thing about going low is you can always bring it up.
That's true.
Or high. Wait,
It's
I'm looking at the wrong.
140. Yeah, 145.
But we're at 1 quart of water per pound, so we could add some boiling water and bring that up a little bit.
Yeah.
So actually, we're doing we could do a 2-rest. We could call this a 2-rest mash.
I always start thinking I'm going to do a single temperature mash, and it ends up being a step mash just because I hit low every time.
But that's not a big deal, and it smells so good.
Mm-hmm.
Now, while we were resting and the enzymes were converting our starches to sugar, I took the opportunity during a break in the action to ask Casey about his method of making all-grain starters.
So while the mash is happening, this is our second temperature. We're up to like 157 or
7, yeah. Maybe 156.
So we're doing the second rest.
Yeah.
While we're doing that, I want to talk about your technique for making a starter that apparently is innovative. And, if somebody else has done this, I'd like to get an email from them. But
Yeah, someone else who can claim, hey, this was my idea first. I didn't,
So this is, we're kind of calling it, we've heard of mini mashes.
Right.
And we're kind of calling this a teeny mash, or at least I think I started calling it a teeny mash.
That's a pretty good term.
What
yeah.
did you call it?
Well, I'm just doing I wanted to do an all-grain starter. I actually don't usually keep kind of dried malt extract on hand, which is usually what people do, kind of make their starter.
Right.
So just a really miniature-sized mash so that I can end up with about a quart of wort for doing a starter. So that ends up being 4 or 5 ounces of grain, and I mash in with a cup or a cup and a half of water, and it's all in this little French press.
So it's almost like you're making a beer.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
An all-grain beer.
Uh-huh.
So take us through the process. You've got the French press coffee maker, and describe what that is for people who may not know what it is.
Well, it's a glass
Beaker. It looks like a beaker.
Yeah, a glass beaker, and then it has a mesh baffle, I guess you could call it, that you kind of press through. Typically with coffee, you press through, leaving the grounds at the bottom and the coffee on the top.
And you just boil your grounds in the water, and at the end of it, you squish them down to the bottom.
Yeah.
Leaving the clear, hopefully, coffee at the top.
Yeah, that's it exactly. And I was making coffee one morning and thought, hey, I could do that with grain. And so that's essentially what I do. I mix the grain in the water, and I actually typically set it in another, like a saucepan full of water to kind of keep it warm, because on its own it cools down fairly quickly.
Yeah, it's glass and there's no insulation. That's
Right.
a good point.
Right. So let it sit for an hour, and then add another couple cups of water to mash out. and then I press it, and I end up with a quart of wort. I usually just boil it for half an hour or so. I typically don't hop my starters, and then I've got an all grain starter. So it's a little fussy, but it works pretty well. And then it's kind of the fun of being able to say, hey, I actually all grain even down to the starter.
It's all grain from the very start to the end. What kind of feedback have you had from people who've heard that you've done this?
Well,
And some of those may be in the room.
Usually it's, wow, that sounds like a lot of work. Yeah, I'm actually curious to hear what kind of like, as your listeners hear it, some of those who might be looking specifically to, like, if you're doing an original Pilsner and you're, it's supposed to be a one ingredient beer and you don't want dried malt extract in there. Yeah, just to be able to do a starter that includes your original ingredients. Yeah, it seemed like a nice way that it really isn't. You don't really have to fuss with it too much once you start. So it only ends up being a little bit more work than doing it with dried malt extract.
And home brewing is about the process, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been harvesting my yeast and washing my yeast, and somebody said, well, yeast isn't that expensive. Why go to all the trouble? Well, because you can.
Right.
It's another part. It's another thing to do with brewing. It's another part of brewing. So, I mean, if you have fun doing this.
So very true. Yeah. There's I think the more you kind of get into beer, the more you realize you're not doing this to save money. Just doing it for the love of making good beer. And this is kind of another little layer in that for me.
There you go. So Brian, have you done the teeny mash yet?
I've never done a yeast starter in my life, so no. But I think it sounds like fun. I mean, I have a French press at home, and it's my favorite way of making coffee. And Casey's turned me over into the teeny mash lifestyle as well. So I like the idea. I think it's a great idea. And I mean, it does save a little bit of money, I guess, but for the more purist kind of aspect of it, I really like it. So.
One more thought on kind of like getting your coffee press ready for making a teeny mash. There's a lot of oils in the coffee, so kind of making sure you have a really good hot water rinse, maybe a little soap, but then making sure you rinse off the soap. But just to make sure you don't end up with a mash that ends up ruining the head of the rest of your beer.
That's a good point. And unless you're making a coffee porter or something like that, you don't want the coffee flavor in.
Right. Yeah.
I wonder if using something like PBW, powdered brewer's wash, to clean the French press ahead of time, just because that, at least for cleaning my other materials, just really gets off all the gook and any residue and stuff. And it's really low maintenance too, so it might be worth trying.
Whoa, that's an interesting sound.
You wanted noises.
Now we have we've done our mash, and we've sampled some good homebrew and some good chili with some good homebrew in it. And now we're what are we doing now? We're lautering.
Yes, it looks nice and thick. We did a few quarts of Vorlafing, and started coming out much clearer. So now we're lautering.
Is all of that going to fit in there?
No. We're not worried about that, though.
We'll worry about that when it does get full.
Yeah. We'll switch that pan when we come to it.
And we're going to do a batch sparge.
Yeah.
So we'll drain all this out, and we'll fill it back up, stir it around a little bit, and boil off again, and then drain it back out again.
Yeah, Jason has his kettle that he's got full of heated water, and that's what we'll use next for our next sparge. Yeah.
And what was our target original gravity going into the fermenter? We figure it will be like 1.106.
That's correct.
And what were the IBUs?
Our total IBU is going to be 87.35.
So fairly hoppy, but
it's going to be pretty malty too. So
yeah,
it'll be a good balance.
Yeah, and a big beer.
Mm-hmm.
So we're outside in the garage. We've got two boils going now. One inside, one outside.
We just added the bittering hops. And what did we decide for the bittering hops?
We went ahead and got, I'm trying to remember exactly how much. It was an ounce and a half of Warrior, which are pretty high alpha acid hops.
It's like 14.5 or something.
Yes. So, so they upped our IBU quite a bit. But given how malty this beer is going to be, and just with the sheer quantity of wort that we're boiling, it's not going to be a really super bitter beer. At least that's not the plan.
Yeah. We'll see what happens.
Right. It's always an adventure with homebrewing.
That's right. And we kind of eyeballed how much each pot had in it, and we still got to kind of figure out at the end how we're going to combine it all together. But,
right. We're hoping it boils down enough that we can fit it into at least one vessel before we separate the beer out.
Yeah.
Because we're doing it a little differently this time. We're not fermenting in one fermenter. We're splitting it out among each of the 4 blind mice to ferment on their own.
So we're going to boil it down into a manageable quantity, cool it down, pitch it, and then divide it by 4.
Right. Well, don't forget aerating.
Oh,
we couldn't forget
that's
that.
right. That's right. But not hot side aeration.
No, we wouldn't want that.
You and Casey have got a little discussion going on hot side.
You could call it a discussion if you want, James, but we tend to be a bit at odds. When hot side aeration was first brought up today, Casey was a little concerned about it. I said, "Oh, you mean the myth of hot side aeration?" And he kind of gave me a sneering look. But
in fact, you were kind of splashing a little bit when you were pouring some wort from one kettle to the other,
and I could hear him cringing across the room. So I was a little bit more mellow when I poured the wort, and so he got a little more understandable. So it was good.
Very good. Brian's doing a whirlpool. We have gone through all the hopping, and we've gone through all the boil, and we've cooled down both brew kettles of beer. Now we've got one above on the stove and one below on the floor, and we are doing a whirlpool to kind of hopefully separate out some of the trub a bit.
The whirlpool is a great tool for, it's very low tech, and you just kind of swirl it around and get a good swirl going, and then you just let it settle, and you've got a nice little cone of trub right in the center.
The cone of trub. Is that all you're gonna work? I usually go for a little longer.
More? Okay,
I go for a little longer. And I think Casey, I don't know. I think he's on the edge of being anti-whirlpool.
No, I wouldn't call it anti-whirlpool. I just really haven't done this. Usually, once I've chilled, I siphon out with the chiller still in there. So I kind of, I'm taking the temperature and making sure I'm down to a good temperature, and I swirl it around a little bit inside the immersion chiller, but nothing to the state of the vigorousness that we're doing here.
And this would not be hot side aeration.
No, it certainly would not. We're below 80, so at this point, the more air, the better.
I think that's probably good. You got a good rapid whirlpool going there, and you could see the bowling effect of the wort there. And Casey's also got a little kettle of water, little pan of water boiling there.
Yeah, we're getting ready to sanitize the air stone for pumping some air into the wort.
And you also use it for something else too. That was handy.
Yeah, I stick the end of the tube, the siphoning tube in there, which makes it a lot easier to get over the end of the rack and cane.
Makes it more pliable.
Yeah.
And Jason, are you packing up?
I am. I have to leave.
Are you leaving? Well, it was good to meet you.
Oh, thank you.
And glad you could take part. And
yeah, had a lot of fun. Tasted a lot of great beers.
And you'll get some of the beer later. Casey's going to take care of you.
So.
Yeah, not going to leave you hanging.
I will make sure.
Well, it was good to meet you.
Nice meeting you.
I think so.
Okay, time has passed. We've started the siphon, and the aeration stone is happily boiling in the background. And pretty soon we're probably going to see the cone of trub start to appear.
Cone of trub.
Casey, have you ever seen the Cone of Truth beer?
No, I don't think I have.
This would be.
Oh,
Pay attention. Keep the end.
too busy looking for the Cone of Truth.
Yeah,
not enough attention being paid to siphon it.
Wow, that's a lot of Trub in there. Of course, there's a lot of hops, a lot of whole hops.
That's true. How many ounces did we end up with of hops in this beer?
Of whole hops?
We ended up with 7.5 ounces
Of hops.
of hops.
And
two of those ounces were pellets.
Okay.
And then half of that is in this pot.
Yeah.
You know, I tend to favor the hop pellets over the whole hops because of this. I mean, if you see, you know, I guess Casey and you and I both say that, you know, the whole hops, they really soak up a lot of of your beer.
They sure do.
And Brian, I think, weighs in on the liking the whole hops.
And actually, I've kind of gone that way too, even though I'm like, they are kind of inefficient, but there's kind of a nice authenticity to using whole hops too. So it just depends. Sometimes when I look down at the pot and I'm like, those things soaked up a gallon of my wort, then I'm not so happy.
Well, I can certainly see why professional large-scale brewers or even, you know, craft brewers and microbrewers, that they have to use pellet hops for the majority of their beers. I mean, they're not dealing in ounces, they're dealing in hundreds of pounds. I mean,
Yeah.
And not only are our whole hops less efficient in that they soak up so much Trub, but they're harder to get higher utilization out of.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes for a lot, when you're ordering that many hops for, you know, so many barrels of beer that you're making, it's just becomes an expense issue as well.
And if you're making a big, like an IPA or something with a whole lot of hops, it depends on how big your kettle is going to be, whether you can fit them all in there.
Once a year, Great Divide makes a fresh hop brew that they actually, right around the hop harvest, they order hundreds of pounds of hops, like wet off the vine. I mean, they're not even dried out yet, and they can only, and you would think that would be like a great IPA that they make, but they can only fit so many pounds of hops in their giant brew kettles, so they end up with a pail. They end up with something around 55 IBUs, and it ends up being a delicious, fresh smelling and tasting beer, but it's not super big because they can't make a big beer with that many with whole hop flowers like that.
Mm-hmm. Now we're not getting the Cone of Truth.
No. I mean, it might still be there. It's just hiding underneath all the hop flowers.
Yeah, I'm thinking that if we hadn't used all those whole hops, that we'd see more of a defined cone of Trub. So Casey is still skeptical about the whirlpool, but being polite about it, I think.
Yeah, he is. He's very polite.
Okay, we're down at the end. We've been my little part of the beer has been aerating with the aquarium pump for a while now. How long?
Probably 30 minutes or
Really?
so, I think.
It's got a good head on it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Beautiful, white, creamy head. Looks like a nice beer cappuccino.
And now we're going to pitch some yeast. You got a yeast starter there, an all-grain teeny mash starter.
That's right.
With, did you say London ale yeast?
Yeah, Y yeast 1028. So tell David Logston, thanks for the good yeast.
If it works.
Right. Then maybe congratulating him a little
in
too
a couple
soon.
weeks.
Yeah, we'll check back in a couple of weeks. Which by the time this this runs on the podcast, it may be that time.
The sound of yeast starter flowing. Okay.
Looks good. One to grow on. There
That's
we go.
right.
We'll swirl that up and call it good. So this has been fun. This has been my first combined brewing experience.
Community brew.
That's right.
Yeah.
And are we happy with the results?
So far, so great.
So it looks good. We tasted the wort. It tastes pretty good.
It does. Yeah.
Tastes like lots of malt character,
Lots of
Lots of
hops.
hops. And I think maybe once the yeast gets a chance to work on it, balance will show up
Yeah.
and it'll be good.
So our lessons for today, what have we learned?
I learned more about the French press teeny mash. And I found we used that siphon, and that
the auto siphon.
The auto siphon seemed to work pretty well. It worked especially well for getting it out of the brew pot.
Yeah, we had a challenge, as they say in the corporate world, with getting the wort out of the brew pots because of the tremendous amount of whole hops.
Right.
But without the auto siphon sucking that stuff out of there,
We would have lost a lot more wort to the hops, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'm certainly like going to try swirling, kind of getting the cone of trub, and I think especially with pellet hops, where sort of the amount of sediment is a little bit more
compact.
Yeah. I'm definitely up for trying that one on future brews.
And we are still unsettled on the hot side
yeah.
aeration
Well,
debate.
it's good to have a little bit of tension. Keeps things interesting.
And what was the other swirling controversy that we talked about?
I don't remember another swirling controversy.
Well, maybe that's good.
There was a controversy about what makes a stout a stout.
Oh, that was the
Oh,
one.
yeah.
That was the one.
I still vote roasted barley.
I'll have to side with one of the giants of specification, Randy Mosher, who says that roasted barley does make for a dry stout, but not necessarily stout.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So,
One of those debates that will continue on
which
in
yeah.
friendly terms, though.
Right.
Of
No
course.
bruises, no blood.
Over the a good debate to be carried out over a few pints.
there you
of
go.
Yeah, there you go.
various
Gives
examples
you
of stout.
something to talk about. Well, Brian, it was good to see you again.
Thank
in
you,
person.
James.
It's good to brew with you.
Yes.
And Jason, in absentia, hopefully he's listening to this now. And it was good to meet you too, Jason. And Jason had to go a little early.
Right.
And Casey,
the call.
thank you so much for the use of your house.
Oh, you are welcome.
And,
thank you so much for coming.
Well, it was a blast.
Good to have another blind mice.
Yeah.
Blind mouse.
Right.
And hopefully we can inspire other people to do the same.
Yeah.
Indeed, and it would be really fun to hear what people come up with when and if they give this a try too.
There you go.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that trip back in time as much as I did. Thanks again to Casey for having us over to his house way back when, and thanks to Brian and Jason for playing along. And congratulations again to Casey and Dorothy for 5 years of delicious beer at Ivory Bill. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to James at basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. So until next time, until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. In the meantime, stay well and stay tuned. So long.